So this is our project, the Android Fake ID vulnerability by Group 3, by How-Who, Mark Lawbender, Zach Webster, Brett Kaplan, and Scott Weiss. So this vulnerability centers around the fact that all Android applications are signed. Those signatures form the basis of multiple security features within Android OS. Applications can be signed using self-signed certificates generated by the application owner. This is the same way that websites work on the internet. You'll often see that a website, it notifies you that a site is signed with a self-signed certificate, and it asks you if you want to trust that. But websites or web browsers are a little bit more secure than Android tends to be, and actually will ask you whether or not you want to trust a site using a self-signed certificate, where Android will implicitly trust them, but the level of trust that it gives depends on what we will explain in the following slides. So self-signed certificates can actually refer to other certificates as their issuer, and this allows one self-signed certificate to reference another as its issuer, and that one can reference another as its issuer, and so on, creating a long certificate chain that is basically all bundled together in a single cert that every app is signed by. Somewhere in the certificate chain is contained the certificate authority for the cert chain as a whole. A certificate authority is just the entity that issues the certificate. It is important in Android because a cert CA determines the level of trust that Android will give to the app signed with a certificate. Android determines whether or not to give the app special permissions on the basis of whether or not the app is signed by a trusted CA. In Android, certain permissions are reserved for specific trusted CAs which are hard-coded into the operating system. For example, in order for an app to update software created by a specific company that's known to Android, like Adobe or Google, any update app, APK, has to be signed by the CA from that company. So for example, if we wanted to update our Adobe app, then our update app, our update APK, would actually have to be signed by a certificate whose trusted CA was Adobe. The question is, how does Android actually determine the certificate authority? It does so by searching one by one through the certificate chain until it finds the trusted certificate authority. Then it stops. Once the trusted CA is found, the permissions reserved for that CA are granted to the apps signed with any cert in the chain, and Android stops there. So all a cert has to do is, somewhere in the chain, it has to use the certificate of a trusted CA in order to gain permissions of that CA. And it's important to remember that these CAs are public. The apps that are on your phone now are signed with these CAs, and they can be reverse engineered out of them, and some of them can even be found publicly available online. How does Android verify the certificate chain has not been tampered with in any way? Well, it doesn't. Android doesn't actually assert the validity of the cryptography of certificates that it's reading through. It simply reads through them, sees if there's a trusted certificate authority in any of the certs in the chain, and it assigns those permissions to the app if one exists. It doesn't check to make sure that the certificate chain hasn't been doctored in some way, which makes this actually very vulnerable to exploitation. The fake ID vulnerability. Android doesn't verify that the certificate chain hasn't been doctored. This means that attackers can very easily modify a self-signed cert to claim that the public cert of a trusted CA is its issuer. So an app signed with the cert will be granted the full permissions of the trusted CA as though it were actually intended to be signed by that CA. So this is an example of what a doctored cert chain actually looks like. Normally, you'd have some chain of certs. In an actual, genuine certificate chain, we'd have a cert that has an issuer that points to another cert, and that issuer could point to another cert, creating these long chains. And the way that Android handles them is it simply looks at the first cert, it scans through it to find a trusted CA. If it doesn't find one, it goes through the issuer, which is essentially a pointer to another cert, and it repeats this process until it either finishes the chain or it finds a trusted CA. All that we have to do, all that an attacker actually has to do, is use some kind of script to modify the code so that the issuer now points to a cert that didn't actually issue our original certificate. And this works because Android doesn't verify the cryptographic integrity of the attacker's self-signed cert. In our project, we demonstrated the proof of concept of this vulnerability by setting up a victim app that can only receive data from an app that has a special permission that we hard-coded into the victim app. The special permission is only granted to apps that have the same CA as the victim app. We then created an attacker app that attempted to send data to the victim app. When the attacker app is signed by its genuine self-signed cert, an unmodified self-signed cert simply generated using SSL crypto, it's unable to send data to the victim app. But when we use a simple Python script that we'll show on the next slide to modify this cert, then the attacker app is able to claim it's issued by the victim, and the victim recognizes it as being a genuine app, even though they're not signed by the same they don't use the same certificate. It's just that the attacker app references the victim app's certificate as its issuer. So here's the script that we use, and just to basically run through the comments that we put in here. First, we load in the target certificate, or the certificate of the victim app that we're going to use as claim our certificate was issued by. So we load that in using an SSL package for Python. We store that as an OpenSSL certificate. We load in a .pem file, which is how these certificates are individually stored as a file on the file system. Then we go through this long process of generating a new key, creating a brand new certificate that we're going to, self-signed certificate that we're going to sign our attacking app with. And right here is the key line, where we are actually setting the issuer of our certificate to the target certificate, which is shown by this line right here. Down here we finally sign our certificate with RSA encryption. We go through the process of exporting this to a PEM file, or it's actually a PFX file, but that can be later converted to a PEM file. Then we additionally set the CA certificate to the CA of the target cert. Then we export the newly generated attacker cert, and we can sign our attacking app with the certificate. This is the only part of the process that we've actually modified. Everything else goes according to the normal process of creating an Android application, creating a self-signed certificate for it, and signing the application with that certificate. The key to this vulnerability is that the cryptography of the attacker cert is never actually checked by Android. The attacker app is granted the special permission simply on the basis that somewhere in its chain it references the certificate authority of the victim application. Although our example is just a proof of concept and doesn't demonstrate a real vector of an attack, it demonstrates that it's entirely possible for someone with a better knowledge of injecting code, for example, would be able to use this to gain access to apps already installed on the device under a trusted certificate authority, modify those apps through something like an update, a malicious update, and then have a full sandbox escape into that device through those apps by injecting code into them.